Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Kidde Vehicle Fire Suppression System webinar. My name is Matt Burtney. I'm the content marketer for Levitt-Safety, and today I'm going to be your moderator for this webinar. I'm joined today by Derek McEwen, who is the Market Segment Manager for Fire Systems at Levitt-Safety, and Patrick Sullivan, the Product Manager for Kidde. Before we go into the topics we're going to cover today, I'd like to do just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's webinar, so we'll email everyone with that recording probably in the next 24 hours or so. There'll also be a question and answer period at the end of today's webinar. If we don't have time to answer your question or the question is a bit too specific for a broad audience, we'll contact you after the webinar to talk you through those questions. And you can submit questions anytime during the presentation through the Ask Question functions of GoToWebinar, and we'll spend the last 10 to 15 minutes of today's presentation answering those. So I'll pass it over to Derek McEwen to do a little bit of an introduction for himself and Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. Well, right off the hop, I guess I will apologize as we are having a little bit of technical difficulties. I would have loved to have had you all see my wonderful smiling face. Unfortunately, I can't get my webcam to work, so we'll have to live with some of the technology that we're on face with, but hopefully everybody has a clear hearing, So yeah, welcome. Our on the daily inspections is our topic for Kidde vehicle fire suppression systems. This is the second part of a series that we've been doing in regards to vehicles and a little bit of additional the end user killer, how to make sure that your staff are doing what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. So joining me today is Pat Alvin, product manager from Kidde Fire.
Hello, everyone. I've been the product manager here for the Kidde vehicle line. It'll be 10 years next month, as a matter of fact. So I'm looking forward to participating with Derek on this this webinar.
Thanks, Patrick. So why is it important that we do this? Is essentially, I mean, vehicles can and do they're running very extreme conditions. There's mechanical and other failures that happen on these machines, which will cause some fire-related incidents. Fire systems have come in the last few years from dry wet chem, and why that's important, especially as we run with higher temperature tier 4, tier 3 engines.
Yes. So historically, the market had been using dry chemical, and over the last 10 years or so, as the engines with the new emission standards start running hotter and hotter, people were asking for a wet suppression agent that helps cool down all those hot spot components, just so it minimizes any chance of a reflash. The dry chemical does a wonderful job of knocking down the fire, so it's not in a raging immense inferno. And then the wet chemical sort of comes in as a mop-up operation to keep all the hot items like your turbochargers and hydraulic manifolds cool, so they don't reflash after the system has completed its discharge.
Yeah, excellent. So our agenda is, we've covered the introduction, why we have vehicle fire suppression systems on these vehicles, some of the differences between the type of services or inspections, and then really the primary target today is to make sure that we focus on what to do for daily inspections with vehicles. So of course, we kind of touched on this already. The goal of a vehicle fire suppression system is primarily to protect the operator or passengers of these vehicles. You can find a vehicle fire suppression system on anywhere from a mining vehicle, very large items like a shovel, the largest machinery out there, right down into, sometimes they even install them into skid steers. So systems can be very big and complex, or very small and simple. They can be run with automatic detection systems, or they can be run just a manual operated system. So they vary quite a bit, but especially when we talk.
Hey, Derek, we're having a bit of a hard time hearing you here. So Patrick, if there's anything that you'd like to jump in with at the moment while we get Derek's audio figured out, that'd be great.
Sure, no problem. So yeah, just to pick up on what Derek was saying on this slide, basically, if you can roll it, it can have a vehicle fire suppression system on it. And what Derek was saying is that, we cover machines from the largest ones, or the large, massive hydraulic shovels, all the way down to even the small skid steer type equipment, forklifts, that sort of thing, and everything in between. In different markets, landfills, forestry, mining, warehouse, dock operations with container material handlers. It's really, like I said, it's all over the place. Cranes, drills, shovels, haul trucks, all sorts of different off-road applications for vehicle fire suppression systems. And each one of those markets really brings in its own set of challenges. In some markets, the machines are running essentially 24 hours, 7 days a week, every day of the year. There's no such thing as vacation days and holidays for the machines. And so with that, just a tremendous amount of uptime on the machine, parts wear out very quickly. You can have, if you don't keep up with the maintenance on the vehicle and the general housekeeping that's required, you can run into, making the vehicle at risk for an unwanted fire condition, obviously. And then in other markets, the machine's not running that often, but, like in forestry, that fellow buncher is out in the middle of nowhere, and you want the peace of mind that there's a fire suppression system on board to help that operator out in the event that there's a fire. So each one kind of, like I said, brings its own challenges to the marketplace as far as the demands on the fire suppression system.
I thank you, Patrick, for filling in there. Hope everybody can hear me a little bit. Anyone better can.
You're still cutting in a little bit here and there.
Yeah. I guess it was just stable coming in. What? Better? Hello?
You sounded good. You sound good right now.
I sound good now? Okay.
Yes. Don't move.
Just trying to shrink down. Can you guys also, I'm just, I had a little bit of, on the presentation portion, just so I can confirm, is everybody seeing the presentation only, or are you also seeing my menu?
Yeah, you're good. It's just the presentation only now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you a little bit, and again, Patrick, for filling in there for really appreciate it. You covered everything better than I would have. So I talked about the operators being our primary point of protection, why we put vehicle fire suppression systems on. We also want to make sure that we mitigate the risk of downtime on these machines. So if we can catch a fire situation in its earlier stages, then we can really create if the fire system puts whatever that is before a lot of damage, it creates less repair time for that vehicle. And in the worst case, can even prevent, the complete loss of a unit, which in some cases it can take months in order to get a replacement unit. So we like to try to also make sure that we're mitigating that risk of downtime or loss. And finally, we're also there to protect the environment. Some of these machines operate in underground, they operate in volatile areas, so you make that you're not creating a bigger hazard, or we can start to reduce that hazard that could be there. And as well, I mean, these machines also come into shops for service. So we have a lot of our systems are run with full-time fire suppression, and if you're inside of a bay and if something occurs while you're welding or doing any other maintenance, then that can also be your system can be actuated, and that helps protect the infrastructure surrounding it. And how now? So Levitt-Safety is a company. We're here. We've been in the industry 85 years as a fire and life safety company, and really been a big part of the vehicle fire suppression systems in Canada here for 50 plus years. So we have wonderful strategic partners like Kidde who help us bring this stuff to market, and we become an authorized distributor through the Kidde network. That allows us to train our technicians through them, factory trained, and then we also do internal auditing of our technicians, so make sure that they're capable of doing everything that they need to do, not only from just going to classroom setting, but in the field as well. So that's offering you guys, the end user, the highest level of quality as we can assure it. And we're situated across Canada from coast to coast, able to deploy in the most remote locations. And even now, like during COVID, we found innovative ways to, help support this stuff, whether via, a FaceTime to a mechanic in a field or webinars with engineering firms. We've just done lots of different transitional stuff to help support this during a time when we can't necessarily be on site. So with the service and maintenance overview, I kind of touched on this earlier. There's a daily, weekly, or monthly inspection that's going to be done. That's primarily done by end user, the operator, or you'll also more different weekly or monthly check or detailed perhaps the daily.
Sorry, Derek. One of the tricky things, I guess, with working remotely is that we can't always guarantee how great the internet access is going to be. Patrick, would you be able to hop in here and walk a little bit?
Yes, sure, no problem. I was just going to ask you if you want me to translate garble for for all the panelists here on the call.
Perfect.
So what Derek was talking to on this slide is the operator, the system owner. They're the frontline maintenance crew. They're the honorary service crew for the fire suppression system, and we need their support on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis, keeping an eye on the system, making sure everything is proper, the system is properly configured to provide the top performance fire suppression system on board the vehicle. And then on a 6-month or 1,500-hour service basis, Levitt-Safety and other authorized Kidde distributors would come on board, perform a really detailed preventive maintenance for the system, and then that will continue on and up to a 12-year period. And after 12 years, the cylinders are taken out. They're due for a full hydrostatic test on the cylinder shell. They're refilled, they're recharged, the valve is rebuilt, and the system is put back into service. And all those steps really ensure that the system remains completely vigilant and ready to respond at any time to as soon as a fire event erupts on board the vehicle.
I've held in a busy different form. How's my audio now?
You sound good right now, Derek.
Webcams started. My connections, they're good and full today, and now suddenly not. So we'll plug along here again, Patrick. Thank you. So I think you did touch on all of the points that we were talking about here. So the visual inspection, just that quick visual check, daily basis to make sure that just checking key points. We're going to go into that a little further. As you go into here, more of a weekly and monthly. So you did cover, again, 6-month or 1,500-hour maintenance portion. This is something that gives us the assurance that that system's operating at its maximum capacity. This needs to be done by an authorized Kidde distributor. So Levitt-Safety being one, we would love to be able to come out and do these for you on whatever interval basis that works for you. And in this one, we're doing a little more in-depth. We're actually doing things like blowing lines and making sure that testing all the devices, making sure that everything works. So we're actually bringing that system into right up to its full capacity from where it should be from install. And then on that 12-year interval, I think, Patrick, you touched on this too, where we're doing the hydrostatic testing, making sure that all the hoses are still meeting the criteria that they need to meet, that there's no, the tanks are all in perfect condition, and that the agent, if needed, the agent gets replaced as well. Still being able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
Excellent. I finally found the sweet spot. Okay, so we'll go right into the inspection portion. And I think this is really where we wanted to key in today anyways. And this is where we can, from an end user perspective, this is what you should be doing on a daily basis in order to make sure that these vehicle systems are running the way that they should. So it's a check for all the components, making sure that if there's any physical damages, any degradation that you can visually spot, other obvious, things that may look like it shouldn't be in place. And, I think for the most part, you can, with a checklist, you're able to go through these components, but if you spot something that doesn't quite look right, I think trusting that gut intuition is always important too, and make sure that you report those things to your supervisor, who will probably in turn be in touch with a Levitt-Safety person if anything is out of line. So the first part, and you can do these in any order, but and you'll find that it'll probably work as an operator comes onto a vehicle. They do certain things at certain points, but we're just going to go through this as we've put it together. You can, of course, variate this in any way that you'd like to see it. So tanks themselves. There's a couple different tanks out there, different sizes, different shapes. The Kidde line is all a stored pressure unit, so you will find that they all have a gauge on them, and that's one of the things that we're going to be checking. This tank here that you see in the picture obviously has been through the mill something fierce. It's taken extreme damage, but it actually shows a lot of what we'd be looking for impairments. So any obvious physical damage, any rust, any gouges, dings, or abrasions. These are the extremes of those, where you're seeing massive dents and lots of different cuts and abrasions on it. On the gauge itself, there's a green area that you want to keep that gauge in. That will fluctuate a little bit in the Canadian temperatures as we see the extremes of -40 to +40. So there is a temperature differential chart that we can provide as well for those that see the extreme cold, which it might come out of the green a little bit, but it's still functional. And then otherwise, you just want to make sure that all of the head's in place. It doesn't look like it's off kilter, that all of the hosing going in and out is also in good shape and secure. And yeah, just making sure that system or that tank doesn't look like it's damaged physically like this one. Anything you'd like to add, Patrick?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is a couple things. One, as you're inspecting it, you want to make sure that the head, which would be the part there on the right side in this photo with the metal bracket, that the head's under that gauge shield is what you see there. And when you're looking at that, making sure that all the connections are there, they're not missing, they're tight. You're looking at the pressure gauge, making sure it's in the green. You also want to inspect, there's a safety relief burst disc on there. You want to make sure that's not clogged up with debris, because in the event that cylinder is overpressurized due to heat or improper service or for whatever condition, that is going to relieve the pressure buildup instead of having the cylinder fail like you see in this photo where the bottom has popped off. These cylinders are typically pressurized to 360 psi. As Derek had mentioned, they're stored under pressure. That's how Kidde has gone to market with this instead of using an outside cartridge. so you can have entire pressurized units, one single unit to look at in service. So you want to keep an eye out for that, making sure that it's not that safety disc hasn't turned into a ball of mud. In the event that it needs to blow off, it won't be able to. And the only other thing I would say is while you're there checking the cylinder, you give it a little shove. Don't try to tackle it or check it in the boards. But it should be rock steady, either on the weld flange that's mounted to or in the cylinder bracket. If you can give it a little push and it wobbles a little bit, it's not secured properly, and you really need to get that fixed before you put your vehicle into operation. You don't want a pressurized cylinder to pop off and either be bouncing around on board your own vehicle or out in the field. Back to you, Derek.
Spoken like a true Bostonian and probably a Bruins fan. Don't knock it into the board.
We'll leave that all alone right now. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I just wanted to mention quickly, you can see in this picture as well, is the label is completely destroyed. That is also an important part of these systems, and we can get replacement labels to put on them. So we want to make sure that those are also intact. It provides a ton of information for both operator and for us as the manufacturer representatives. And let me click next. So the next thing you probably want to look at is the fitting. So as you see in these pictures, you can see where they're all coming into a block. So fittings themselves should be tight. They shouldn't be able to be moved around. If you put a hand on them and give them a little wiggle, they should stay secure and firm. You want to make sure that they're not, again, physically damaged. That they have they're always boss welded into place as well. So you're not able to pull them away from the machine, or if they're flopping around. And they might be installed in many different variations, where they're on a sidewall, they might be up on a roof panel, they may be all over the place. So if they are dangling or moving around, you want to make sure that that's noted and that you correct it.
You kind of touched on it there, Derek, in that all the hoses, they really should be secured tight to the vehicle structure, up out of the way. You don't want that getting caught on any sort of routine service that the vehicle undergoes, or people moving around. You don't need to be a pants catcher or anything like that. And then when that happens, then these things start to get ripped and they get damaged. And the hoses, they're not installed to add to the cosmetic appearance of the vehicle. The hoses serve, one or two different purposes. You'll have a 1/4-inch hose that might be on board your vehicle as a mechanical means, using a remote nitrogen cartridge to actuate the agent cylinders, or you'll have larger hoses, 1/2-inch or 3/4-inch hoses on board that are your agent discharge hoses. And so if you got a hole in one of those, the system is either not going to actuate, or you're not going to get all the suppression agent deployed into the engine compartment.
Yeah, point. The hosing component is. So from those fittings, that's where the distribution network is now heading out into the hoses, and the hoses will then take it out to all the nozzles. So when you're looking at these hoses, and it was pictured actually really well on the last one and on this one, but you can see how the hoses are secured with P-clamps, and they shouldn't interfere with other pieces or other hoses or wiring that might be in the vicinity. It's important to make sure that that they stay secured. Otherwise, you might end up with that abrasion from hose to hose, or any sort of other thing that it might be rubbing up against. And that can cause either damage to the fire suppression system or damage to other components of the machine. So just making sure that those hoses are intact, that they don't have big wear spots on them, that they don't crack within your hands. As these things get exposed to, multiple pieces of, or multiple different fluids from an engine compartment, or an extreme hot and cold, they do tend to deteriorate over time. So it's something that we inspect not only on a daily basis from a visual perspective, but also something that we look for when we're doing our full-on inspection. Also, just of note, there's two different hosing portions on a lot of systems. One is the actuation hose line. So that's carrying nitrogen through the system to do activation portion, where, as you can see on this picture with the 5 tanks those are the back of all of those. That's the actual distribution network. And that's going out into all the, where you see in the second picture, the nozzles where it connects everything else. The line on the top is your actuation network. And that's, again, that's what just carries nitrogen, whereas the other carries the actual chemical that we're going to be putting on the system.
That's right, Derek. And, you know, you don't need to do a hand over hand on this. You just need to give it, a quick visual inspection, and you'll see if there's an obvious damage to the hoses. I mean, they are using premium grade hydraulic hoses and fittings, so they are fit for purpose, you know, for onboard vehicle applications. So you don't have to worry that if you don't do a hand over hand, it's going to fall apart on you in the next, you know, day or the next shift. They're good. You know, just need to do a visual inspection, and that's all.
Yeah, and as long as you're keeping up with your 6-month or 1,500-hour intervals, we're doing a more or less a pressure test on them at that point every time anyways, and going over them, like Patrick mentioned, hand over hand. There's some really good pictures or examples of some damaged hoses where you can see that they've deteriorated through time, or they have some really strong rub spots. Another important thing is to make sure that the radius bend doesn't change. If they're secured properly, that shouldn't, but on systems that aren't, or a bracket's broken off, you may find that radius has changed and it's become too critical, and that can actually impair, like especially on a dry chemical system, the ability for that dry chem to move through the line. So we just want to make sure that they have a nice natural bend to them, not twisted, kinked, or anything of that nature. Yeah, these are what you'd be looking for to report to your supervisor should you see anything like this. You want to make sure that it gets corrected probably sooner than later. Don't wait for your next interval if you see some nasty stuff happening. So moving on, we get to manual actuators. There's lots of some different types of ways to manually actuate a system. You can do it either with an electric actuation, like you see in the picture on the left with some press buttons, and or on the right you can see a pneumatic actuator. And there's actually electric pneumatic actuators as well. So all three can be used in conjunction or singly. The difference being is that a pneumatic system will offer that ability no matter what the system's condition is. If the panel is offline, you're still able to actuate the system itself. Whereas with the electric, you rely on the system being in that up and powered position in order for them to be operated. When we're inspecting these, we want to make sure that we look for the cartridges in place, that it's got a clear label, it's not obstructed by a bunch of stuff. You can see on the picture on the right that you also have how to operate, pulling the pin, and then striking the red button down. So you want to make sure that the label is there and visible. And also you want to make sure that, so as it says on the label itself, that the pin is in place and it has a seal or an indicator that it hasn't been tampered with. We install those as we do our 6-month inspections. So those should still be in place whenever you come along.
Yeah, and the only thing I want to add to that, Derek, is what you touched on it was make sure there's no obstructions. An operator on board the vehicle or another person needs to be able to physically stand, by one of these stations to operate them. And so you want to make sure that over the course of time, as there's work done on the machine, is overhauled or gone through repairs or modifications, that the equipment doesn't start to migrate and move around on there. You want to make sure that the operator always understands where the emergency operations are, and that equipment's always there. You don't want to come back a week later and find out that mechanical actuator now is on the backside of that stair, or somebody said, "Oh, that's kind of out in the open. I don't want that to get damaged." And they're thinking they're doing service for the system, and they put it inside that little compartment box right next to it. No one's going to find it in a fire event, an emergency. Everyone's just thinking, get off that truck and get as far away as I can. They're not going to spend the time to try to trace a hose line or a wire line back to where the operator station is. And when it comes to those cartridges, the key thing would be to make sure that those are all got a date code on there, and you want to make sure those aren't any older than 12 years. After 12 years, those need to be disposed and replaced with a new fresh cartridge.
Yeah, those are great points, Patrick, especially with the cartridge. And that's something that we do again on our service intervals. And you mentioned, these being at the points of egress, and I've seen them from my experience in the field where they get just completely covered in mud or debris, and you actually have to chip away at them to get them to see them. They're actually even visible again. So important that on a daily basis we're making sure that especially the ones at your points of egress are free and clear of debris. So discharge nozzles, this is another part of that distribution network. These are very critical in their placement. You want to make sure that when you're looking at them that they that all the caps are in place first and foremost. That's what's protecting these systems from getting a bunch of debris back into those hoses or even water, which can impair the distribution of the chemical. So you want to make sure that those caps are in place, and you also want to make sure that the nozzles are. They should have a mounting bracket like you can see in the pictures, and they're pointed into a direction that looks like it's headed in, towards a turbo or towards an exhaust manifold or a starter or something of that nature, and not impaired, like Patrick had mentioned during the previous slide, that sometimes modifications happen and suddenly that nozzle is now blocked by something that somebody stuck in after the fact. So if you see any nozzles that are like just pointing to a blank chunk of angle iron, for example, then there might be a reason or something to bring forward in your inspection notes.
Yeah, absolutely. If it doesn't look right, it's probably not right. That's the short takeaway. And I don't remember if we touched on it already, but those are all shipped with nozzle caps, and that's to keep the nozzle outlet from getting clogged with any debris in there. So if you see a cap is off, besides just putting it back on, you first want to take a moment to look inside and make sure that you can see the inside of that nozzle, so that when there's a discharge, the agent's got a clean exit path out into the engine compartment. If it's clogged up with mud, or if it's the wintertime and if there's ice on there, then there's not going to be any agent coming out of that nozzle.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll move more over to the electrical side of these systems, or as systems get a little more large, or equipment gets a little more larger, the system usually gets a little more complex as well. And that's where you'll find a need for different types of panels. So here we have sort of the history of the Kidde panels, and you can see, and Patrick even pointed out as I built the slide, that there's even ones predecessing this one. So some of the ones that are on here. So there is the KBS models, or the KBS 2000, 2025. These are ones that we've seen, they were predominantly around for about 20 years, but in the last 10 years have really kind of started to take the backdrop to the new Sentinel platforms. All these panels are probably still out there in different capacities, but probably everyone should be looking towards an upgrade. And maybe Patrick, if you don't mind, just sort of letting them know the critical reasons why we move in the direction of new technology.
Sure, absolutely. So the one that you see there on the top left, that gray one with the red stripe across it, that's the KBS 2000. And as I mentioned at the start of the slide, this presentation, I've been the vehicle manager now for 10 years, and that was one of my first actions, was to obsolete that very panel. So no doubt there's some vehicles rolling around out there with that panel still in service, but there's no factory support available for it, no technical support. It's really a good time to work with Levitt or your other local authorized Kidde distributor to figure out an upgrade path on that. And migrating from the KBS 2000 panel to the SA1 panel, or even if you want to use the 2025 panel, that's a pretty easy upgrade and very straightforward, and can be done without really impacting a lot of the system equipment that's already installed on board the vehicle. But yeah, we came out, when I started, we launched the SA1 and the net panel, and the SA1 that really brought a new feature to the marketplace, and that was a standalone self-contained battery powered panel that you could have on there. So even if the machine's off, the system will still be vigilant on board the vehicle. And then the net was, as Derek said, a lot of these vehicles, or machines even, can't call them vehicles sometimes, they've become so large, you really need to have a more expanded control apparatus for the system. And so that's where the net came in play, where it consists of, a network of, and that's why we call it the net, a network of modules, either the control module or the user interface, the NIM module. And the network control module is the brains. The NIM is the one that gives you the feedback to the operator of what's going on there. And so we see that on some of the very large haul trucks, and certainly on a lot of the shovels these days.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Patrick. So daily inspection of a Kidde panel. Primarily what we're looking for here is that LED is green, steady, and on. That's going to indicate to you that you have power to the unit, and that all the monitored circuits are in a condition that is good. So that's what we're looking for. It isn't chirping at you. Chirping can indicate a few different things as well. So we want to make sure that it's not making any noises, and that it's secure, that it is when it's still on the stand or mounted against the wall in a firm fashion, that it's not falling off, so that you can still read the labels on it, and that the display is functioning. So those are some really good things to make sure that the system is operating the way that you're going, or is going to be able to operate when you need it to. And if any conditions outside of that exist, then we're going to make sure that you contact again your supervisor, and then let a Levitt-Safety, your local authorized Kidde distributor, know, so they can come and do work on it. Especially with panels, these are there might be many things that are going on, so it's really important that we have those factory trained people in doing the service work from that point out.
Absolutely, Derek. And like you said, you just want to see the green light. So if it looks and sounds like you're at the casino, then that's an issue that needs to be brought to someone's attention very quickly, to make sure that you can get that system corrected so the vehicle can be put back in operation. And just as importantly, if you come on board the vehicle and the panel is dead as a stone, that's also a problem. In the case of the electrical connection, the power is rather simple for the most part. So if it's plugged in securely there at the panel and it's landed correctly back at the power supply of the battery, then there's something wrong with the panel, and you need to get Levitt or another Kidde distributor to come take a look at that panel and troubleshoot it to see why it's not powering up. And the only other thing I would say is, from talking to our distribution network over the years, these panels seem to be a magnet for hats and lunch boxes, coats sometimes, and you really, as Derek said, you want to make sure, just like the actuators, that there's clear and unobstructed access to these things. So they're easy to quickly see, and there's some level of interaction the operators can have with a silence button or an override button on there. So it's important that it's not covered up on a day in and day out basis. And some folks think that it's an entertainment system, and they try to open these up and hook up their iPhone or other media device on there and listen to music or something like that, or they do other things to it, and it's not there for entertainment. Its job is to make sure that the operator is safe and the vehicle can return to service every day, and that's its job. It doesn't want to do anything else but that. So just let it do its job, and then you can do your job.
Yeah, so right, Patrick. And again, that takes me back to my days in the field, where these are very often used as some sort of hanging system for various things, whether it's a hat or a paper towel roll or something. But yeah, make sure that we're not obstructing them. They're there for a very critical reason. And who knew that 3 red cherries weren't a winner? So green is good, as you can see on here. These systems these are the different, the 2025, the Sentinel Net, and the SA1s all kind of have that same green is good, and that's where you want to make sure on your visual inspection that it's solid and in place. So coming off the panels, one of the things that we do is an automatic detection circuit. These circuits come out from the panel. They're monitored so that we know if they've been compromised or they operate in a normally open, normally closed fashion. So that'll send the signal back to the panel to let us know if there's a condition in the system and set the panel off. The detection system is what gives us the capability of detecting fire scenarios at an earlier stage usually than if we're just reliant on an operator visually seeing smoke or something of that nature. This can pick up heat, that sort of stuff. And it's really critical that if we have one of these, that we're making sure that the circuits themselves or the devices are in good shape. So there's some different methods. There's linear detection, which is a fixed heat, and you want to make sure that linear wire is strung through a compartment the way that it should naturally be going. It has its all the bracketing in place, that it's covering over components of the machine like the turbo or whatnot, but not too close in proximity. If any of those brackets are broken, that could also hinder the ability of it to function properly. So you want to make sure that it's not cut or it doesn't show signs of heat or even abrasion signs. Some of the other devices we see over here on the right are DAFs and IRs. And actually the IR that you see pictured here is one of the old ones. And I can tell that just by the red wiring. So there's been some different phases of these devices. The DAF's been around for a long time and been really a steady workhorse as a heat detection. It's again a fixed heat detector, whereas the IR is probably our most advanced and earliest detection methodology of catching fires in their very early stages. But it has been improved through the years, especially with the cabling coming in and whatnot. So with these devices, you want to make sure that they're clear of debris, that they haven't been damaged. Like with the IR, that the three sensors on it are clear and it's able to sense what it needs to, and that the cabling around them isn't damaged or broken.
That's right, Derek. And as you said, as these are primarily heat sensors for the linear heat sensing cable and the detectifier, it's really important that those devices are clean. They're not covered up in a lot of mud or other debris on there. And again, you want to make sure that something was installed on board the vehicle that is now between the sensor and where the fire is likely to start. Because if the heat can't get to the linear heat sensing cable or to the detectifier, it's not going to alert the system to actuate and put out the fire. And here at Kidde, we've always tried to get the fire as quickly as possible. We don't want to get into a alley street fighting match with a fire event. We want to fight as unfair as we can. So we want to beat it up when it's a tiny little baby, because it can quickly get out of hand beyond what the system can handle. And on the detectifier, a couple other things you want to look at besides just the dirt on it is you also want to make sure there aren't any sort of dents or other physical damage to it. That can really impair the performance of the detectifier. It can go either to a nuisance issue where it's going to trip at a lower temperature than what is expected, and so it's not really a fire event. It's just a normal operation of the vehicle, and that trips off the detectifier because it's got a dent in it, and that becomes a nuisance issue because your vehicle now needs to get idled while you clean up and recharge the system. Or it could delay the response of the system, and then, like I said, the fire is just getting larger and larger and a lot stronger, and to the point where the system may not be able to suppress it then at that point. So between the linear and the detectifier, you really want to make sure they're clean and they have no obstructions between them and where your components of concern are in the engine compartment or elsewhere on the vehicle. The IR, you also have a similar concern in that it needs to be able to see the fire. So if something gets installed between it and those critical components, it's not going to see the fire, and then it won't be able to start. It's a really fast-acting detector. It'll pick up a fire in milliseconds. It's a variation of a flame detector that's used in the U.S. military, and we commercialized it for the vehicle market to the point where we've had fire events, and customers, the fleet owners thought that the system just went off unwanted, and then later on, as the cleanup's going through, they'd find, oh yeah, here's a hose with a pinhole leak in it, or a loose connection, and it caught the fire so fast and then put it back out, and no one ever even thought there was a fire. That's the ideal scenario. So again, in order to respond like that, the IR detector really needs to be able to have a clear line of sight to those risk components on board the vehicle. And you want to make sure that the lens is clean as well. There's no dirt on there. And you should see it with a solid green light on there to indicate that it's in its normal standby state. If it's blinking, that means that there's something wrong with the detector and needs attention by Levitt or another authorized Kidde distributor.
Yeah, right on. And correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but DAFs, as I talk about securing these things, DAFs have an orientation of either vertical or horizontal. So if they're dangling around, that may hinder their performance as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, if they're not secured properly, yes, then it's just floating around. And then again, it requires the heat to build up. So if it's swinging to one side and the hot spot's on the other side, it's not going to catch it. And another key thing, actually, when these are installed horizontally, there's a Fenwal logo on these. It'll say Fenwal, Fenwal,
Mm-hmm.
and you should be able to see that when you're looking up at it. And then it should be in that horizontal plane. If it's not, if it's perpendicular to your line of sight there, that's not installed properly, and then that will also impact its ability to respond to a fire correctly.
Yeah. Here's some good examples of some damaged detection wire. You can see here where you use some heat issues or abrasion. Some of them where it might even not be obvious heat, but you can see the darkening of color. Sometimes that happens through time. And the way these things work is that they're shielded wires, and then once they reach a certain temperature, they can make a connection, putting it into that closed position, and that's when the system will go off. So if you, as a daily check thing, you want to make sure that those things aren't happening. If you catch it before it happens, it'll prevent false discharges. So something to really look for when you're out there walking through your vehicle. Some other wiring and components that we need to look at. Kidde is kind of unique in its in the ability that they give us to make our own wiring harnesses. And this offers actually some, very good solutions for us in the fact that, as you can see on the right-hand picture, we can go with more very robust and solid wiring that meets the criteria that Kidde has put around, but we go above and exceed it. And you just want to make sure that all that wiring is secured very well, that all the connections are in place. If you have the time, this is probably more on a weekly or monthly basis, more of a mechanic sort of thing. If you give each of those connections a little tug or even just a wiggle, make sure that they're not falling apart. They haven't, primarily we use Deutsch connectors. The connectors haven't come apart. That's all very critical to do. And then some other things that you'll see out there also are the horn and stroke equipment, where it's going to be important to let people around, and there may be more than one person on a unit if it's in the maintenance to let them know that the system has gone off, not only from the cab person but around the entire vehicle, so you can hear it and visually see it. These should be visible. You want to make sure that the stroke's clear. During the thing, we would do all of the that the audio is in place, just that they're still, again, hung, secured. And then the other component kind of point out is a maintenance bypass switch, and we'll primarily find in the cab with the panel valves, and we just want to ensure that they're secured and imperfections are good. This is something that we use as mechanics or even as the fire service professionals. We come out and put the systems in bypass in order to do more extensive work, or from a maintenance perspective, if you're doing some welding or some mechanical work on it, in bypass. Just we do make sure that the majority of our systems are all can be actuated either electrically or pneumatically. So even if it's in bypass, you have the capability of if required. There, Patrick.
Yes. So on the maintenance bypass switch, or any of the other electrical connectors, like you said, you want to just make sure, like most of those are all Deutsch connectors now these days. Just want to make sure those connectors aren't cracked that they're clipped in on a tight connection in there. If you see any damage to those, then that unit or that stretch of cable, that should get replaced. But otherwise, I think you hit it all well already there, Derek.
Excellent. We'll just wrap it up by, I mentioned at the very beginning of this, you might build a routine or on your checklist have it situated so that you go through the same things and it makes sense on how you walk around a vehicle. Kind of from a systems perspective, these are the things that we've touched base on that you want to make sure that you're checking. There's various forms of each of these. These are just some depictions to give you an idea of the layout of a system. So on a system that has automatic detection, we have a panel. The panel, you also don't necessarily need automatic detection, but you might have just a panel as part of the operating procedure. From the panel, that will move out to your manual or pneumatic actuators. Those pneumatic actuators would then tie back over towards your system cylinder. The system cylinder can also be actuated electrically from the panel. And from that point out, the system itself, the cylinder will move all of its chemical out onto the rest of the unit via a distribution network. We touched base on the fittings, the distribution blocks, the hosing, the nozzles. Those are all key components as you walk down that portion of the system. And then on the other side of it, we go over towards the electrical components, and that's where you'll see things like the bypass switch or a horn and strobe for alerting people. You also on that side see some electric actuators, and you'll also see that detection circuit. Part of that detection circuit is the working. So you want to make sure that all the system's integrity as its whole is actually in good shape. And again, many different ways you can walk through this, but I would recommend you build a routine and it matches your inspection checklist.
Yeah, that's right, Derek. And like I said, it's a system. So here at Kidde, we spend a lot of time making sure that the parts that we sell are all robust and fit for purpose for the vehicle market. But then there's other parts in there, the hose that's installed by the Kidde distributor, the wiring, the securements, the clips. Those are all part of the system, and those are all the static pieces of the system that work. But at the end of the day, the vehicle operator, as well as Levitt and other Kidde distributors, they're also a part of the system. You're also part of the system because you help make sure that system runs correctly all the time. Without that participation, I don't care whose system it is. Over time will always win out and defeat the system, and then your vehicle is operating at risk.
Such a critical point there, Patrick, and you hit the nail on the head. The daily inspection is going to catch things in its earliest stages, and that will make sure that your system is in its maximum operating capacity. So if we do find damage on these units, just make sure that you are informing your supervisor, that supervisor or yourselves, that then at that point would be in contact with Levitt or the authorized distributor. And from there, we can decide on a path to make sure that we get these systems back up and operating to the capacities that they need to in order to be a critical life-saving device. So with your system, your owner's manual, there's usually always a checklist there for your daily inspections. If you do require a modified version or something, please get in touch with your local Levitt-Safety representative. I'm sure we can find something for you to do your daily checklist or develop a plan with you. And just make sure that you're recording these. It's critical. You can go back and see how a system is functioning and or what if something is continually being a cause of problem. These are the reasons that we record these things in actual paper form or electronic nowadays. Anything else you'd like to add, Patrick, before we turn this over to questions?
I think the one thing I would add is, when you're completing the log there, you should also have with that paperwork the last inspection performed by either Levitt or another Kidde distributor, and you want to make sure that inspection is not more than 6 months or 1,500 hours ago. As I said, Time is always the challenge, and as the longer the system's left unattended without the proper maintenance and inspections, over time, time will always win out and defeat the system. So just make sure when you're doing your inspections and doing your log, just check that paperwork, on a monthly basis, and just say, yep, it's only been 3 months since the system was last inspected. We're fine. But you pull it out and like, oh my goodness, it's been 12 months. It's been a year and a half. That system's way overdue for an inspection by Levitt or another Kidde distributor.
Yeah, exactly. So I see we're getting close to the top of the hour, and Patrick has before I turn this over to questions, I just wanted to say thank you, Patrick, for your involvement. Thank you for covering me during our technical difficulties. The technology and working remotely can be a challenge nowadays, so I appreciate that greatly. And also to others, the behind the scenes people that helped make this presentation work as well within Levitt-Safety. It's a group effort, so thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a great presentation. I'm glad to help out, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So we have time right now for probably one question, and then we'll let everyone get back to their daily life. And we'll answer anybody else who didn't have time to during the presentation afterwards. So a big question that's been coming up a lot is, are daily checks the same on all different types of systems?
That's actually a really good question. So vehicle fire suppression systems in general have some commonalities. There is no question, but each system is definitely a little bit individual in the way that they go about their particular methodology. So the answer would be, long answer is complex, but the short answer is no. They're not all the same, so you would have to modify your daily inspection a little bit for each different type of manufacturer. And a great example of that is like with Kidde and stored pressure. So that doesn't appear on all systems. So on a daily check for a Kidde system, you want to make sure that pressure gauge is in the green operating zone, just as one example.
Yeah, and Derek, since you brought that up, with stored pressure, one of the advantages of that is when you get out into, when it comes to dry chemical, NFPA requires that on a yearly basis, agent containers that are not under pressure, that agent is inspected on a yearly basis. If it's stored pressure, like in a Kidde system, you can go 6 years before you need to inspect the dry chemical. So that's just one example of the variations that you can find from system manufacturer to system manufacturer.
Anything else for us, Matt?
Yeah, one other question we have here for you is, can you address the rumors in market about industry moving away from dry chem to only wet chemical?
So I think that the major purpose for wet chemical, the adoption of wet chemical, is definitely as the temperatures and the components of new machinery running higher and hotter temperatures required a better method to ensure that there wasn't a chance of reflare. So we're taking the fire tetrahedron, which dry chemical does a great job of doing that initial knockdowns, and the wet chemical is now taking away a second part of the tetrahedron by cooling, and that cooling factor is really critical when we talk about turbos running at temperatures of 1100 degrees Fahrenheit plus. So that is to address the question. I think dry chem can always remain a portion of systems, but the wet chemical just offers a dual method of doing that, of doing the job. So it's taking away more parts of the tetrahedron, fire tetrahedron, which actually gives you a better chance of not having reflare. And just as a note, we call these fire suppression systems as the primary goal is to make sure that operators can get off. 99% of the time we do extinguish the fire, but we want to make sure that we just get everybody safe first, and that's why we call them suppression systems.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, that as far as those rumors go, another hat that I wear at Kidde Fire Systems is I am also the product manager for our carbon dioxide systems. And so I've been at the company now for almost 20 years. When I first started, everyone told me that carbon dioxide was going to become obsolete in the next 2 or 3 years. Here I am 20 years later, and I'm still managing that line. It's very healthy, and I see no end in sight for carbon dioxide. And I think that tells a very similar tale for dry chemical, and that's been the primary agent of choice in the vehicle market for 40, 50 years now. Wet chemical is new to the market still. It's been out for about 10, 15 years now, and with different various manufacturers. And I think there's certainly a place for it in the vehicle market, but I'm not convinced yet at this point in time that it's going to completely displace dry chemical from either the top of the suppression food chain, or even make it a little cousin, little brother to the preeminence of wet chemical. I'm not sure that that's how the future will unfold. There's just been a lot of decades after decades of successful use of dry chemical. I would be very surprised to see that go away completely.
It is very effective, no question. And oftentimes at Levitt-Safety, because we try to be above the curve, we actually do dual agent systems where we're incorporating both factors, because you get the superior knockdown total flood capability of a dry chem followed by a cooling factor of an LVS or a liquid system.
All right, guys. Well, that about wraps it up for us. So Patrick, Derek, thank you guys both so much for taking the time to do this webinar with us today. There's a lot of great information and great insight passed along. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
And to all of our attendees, we will be sending out the recorded version of this webinar within the next 24 hours or so. So look for that in your inboxes. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Yes, thank you.